again on the occasion of this career achievement borderline. And as a way to start the conversation on this masterclass, I would actually like to go back to the time when you were not a filmmaker yet. And I wanted to ask you about your encounter with cinema, whether in your younger days you were a film lover, and if there was a moment in your life when you decided or realized that you wanted to be a filmmaker.
Well, I grew up before, till 12 years old, before television. So the cinema Saturday afternoon was my excitement each week.
And what kind of films were you especially fond of?
Do you have to translate it to Italian?
There's a simultaneous translation.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Where are you?
And afterwards, if there are questions in Italian, you have a headset. Okay.
Yes, so one can't overemphasize how clear the mind was and how strong images were on the big screen on Saturday afternoon for a young boy. And I loved, of course, westerns more than anything. They were still popular. And then when television came in 1956, as I say, I was 12, it was also exciting.
And when you started making films yourself, or rather you started working in television first and making your documentaries and early works, was there already some kind of inspiration? I would say, again, is there something that was driving you towards certain subjects or topics?
Well, really it began on a ship, sailing to Europe in 1965. I was 20 years old and heading to Europe I dropped out of university. My parents despaired of my life. I worked selling real estate and saved enough money to go what was then the cheapest way to go from Australia to Europe was by ship, and heading to Greece. 5 weeks at sea, 700 passengers, and they had no entertainment. So with a couple of friends we put on a ship's review comedy, wrote and acted, then discovered on the top deck a small television studio with one camera. And I asked the purser, what's that for? And he said, well, if the captain needs to abandon ship, he can talk from the little cabin. We've never used it. And so I said, like Mickey Rooney or something, can we put on a show? And he said, what kind of show? And I said, a comedy interview show. So we did 6 half-hour episodes with a captive audience of 700 on the Indian Ocean. And when I got off the ship with my friends, we were the only pale, we hadn't got any sun. And I stepped ashore in Perez, and I thought, I want to find my life in entertainment. That was the beginning. So I tried a bit of acting, I did a bit of directing, a bit of writing, and I found I was best at doing little films. So I got a job in a TV studio, and it all began from there.
At the time when you directed your first feature film, Paris, in the 1970s, the first half of the 1970s, it was probably quite an exciting time for cinema in Australia, because looking back at that time, we now talk about the time of the Australian wave, and in latter days, people started talking about a sub-trend called exploitation, specifically referring to genre films, the low-budget genre films that were produced at that time. And it feels like your first feature film, looking back at it now, of course, it's reading with insight. It feels like it belongs to both these trends. It feels like it was a representative of a new wave, of a new touch in the way filmmakers are approaching cinema, and at the same time it's a film that is made with a low budget, and it's using the tropes of genre cinema. So I wanted to ask you how it was to make that very first film, if it was really such an exciting time to make films in Australia.
It was very exciting, yes. But I would say, like, as you would know from many directors who sat where I am sitting, your first film is a kind of blur. 4 weeks to shoot, just a couple of takes each set up. We were filming for the first time an Australian film in Panavision anamorphic lenses, which was new to me, from 16mm to go to 35mm anamorphic. So I was operating really with very little experience or knowledge, and I'm just glad I completed the film.
Looking back at that film, as it often happens with the career of filmmakers, it looks as if there are already the germs, the seeds of many of the themes that we can find in your following films. And one thing that strikes me in Across the Eight Paris is that already there we have the setup of a character who is somehow lost and finds a figure, a father figure who wants to be a father. And it's probably not the right father for that character. I'm talking about the mayor of the city of Paris. And I feel like throughout the films that you have made in the ensuing years, there have been many times this kind of relationships between, paternal figure, a real father, or someone who could be the father of someone else, and a son. So I was really curious to know, what is it that fascinates you in this kind of relationship, the father-son interaction?
Well, I can't really doctor. It's like a psychiatry couch. I can't say doctor. I really think, looking back at the film recently, it was really driven not so much by a theme like the father-son, it's there, but by the Vietnam War, and the idea that from the politicians, as it were, the end justifies the means. So this town was committing murder in order to survive. And as we were in a war that I was, with other young people then very opposed to, that it was driving this idea that we would just do this dirty work for a brief time, then we could return to being respectable. Father-son things, it's very hard, Doctor, to talk about that. I have a son, and so you wonder about it, but I'm interested you observe it.
And moving on to Picnic at Hanging Rock, which was a huge international hit, and again, it was a film that is now identified as one of the milestones of the Australian New Wave. It's interesting for me to see that after a film that you scripted yourself, you went on for an adaptation, as a literary adaptation. And again, looking at that point through the career, throughout your whole career, you're quite an unpredictable filmmaker in terms of your choices with stories. Because there are filmmakers who always do their own scripts, or filmmakers who always adapt books. But you have done basically everything. You have done your own scripts, like written by yourself. I think the other one mainly is Green Card, where you wrote it just by yourself. Sometimes you wrote with others. Sometimes you film some other people's screenplays. Sometimes you co-wrote adaptations. So you did it all. So what is the choice of a story for you? What is it that drives you to choosing a specific narrative, whether it is an original story or an adaptation? Sorry, it's a wide question.
This is a mystery why I chose these subjects that were not originated by myself. I still don't quite understand it. And generally speaking, particularly with the American films, mostly I would say no. And it was only after I said no to my agent that I would find that if I couldn't get it off my mind, if it kept coming back, that screenplay or that book, not in my mind, my sleeping, my dreams, then I would quickly ring the agent and say yes. And my agent it got that way. When I said no, he wouldn't tell the producers because he would wait to see if I would say yes. This happened with the Truman Show, for example. I said no to that. I said no to Dead Poets Society, and then eventually came back to them. Making a movie for me is an extremely mysterious business. You know, you can master a lot of the craft. You can become very experienced in completing a film on time, on budget, make it look good. But at its heart, the real heart, there's the mystery. How to penetrate that story, that idea, and go into that inner sanctum where you can find inspiration. And again, as for choosing them, if I didn't write it, I would say to the writer, I said it to Andrew Niccol with the Truman Show, firstly, I prefer to work with dead writers, because with dead writers you have no arguments. But I have to tell you that I am going to eat your script. I'm going to eat it so that it becomes part of my blood and viscera. And we won't go into more details, but I have to consume it so it becomes part of my sensibility. Can you take that? Can you stand that? Really, I was saying to them, I think that, as the way I see it, is the script is like the libretto or the book for an opera. And I am the composer, the director is composing the music, and the images are the music. But the most important part. So,
well, in regard to the images, and I want to go to the word you used earlier, the craft. Picnic at Hanging Rock is your first collaboration, if I'm not wrong, with Russell Boyd, a cinematographer with whom then you also made Gallipoli, and if I'm not wrong, You're Bleeding Dangerously, and then you came back to work with him in the last two films, Master and Commander and The Way Back. So and Picnic at Hanging Rock was the first film where critics started thinking of, oh look, this is a great Australian film also in terms of composition, the way the images are conceived, use of the space, the pictorial inspiration. So I would like to ask you something about your work with cinematographers, maybe especially with Russell Boyd, who seems to be someone you found a very special understanding of how to work together, but in general, the way you create those images that turn, following your metaphor, the libretto into the opera.
Well, I was not just Russell, but his operator, Johnny Seal. They were together when I met them. And Johnny was a maestro of the wheels of the camera, of framing, and I learned a great deal from Johnny. Russell would go off and do the lighting, and I learned a lot from him. Before I would begin, in my mind I would have kind of make a trailer in my mind of the script, as if it was. I love trailers when they're good, a good trailer. You say the same word in Italian, right? Trailer, but yeah. And when I made that in my mind, the trailer, I would often pull the best images from my imagination, and I would then talk to the cameraman about this imaginary trailer. Then we would look at some books, more books than films, more paintings, I think, than looking at other movies. And then I would, because of cost reasons, we were always short of money. You're always short of money, but I would divide from a very early time the scenes into A and B. A scenes had to be got right, absolute perfection. In exchange, B scenes are treated quickly, crossing the road, the car pulling up, something, the girl's going up the hill. But in Picnic at Hanging Rock, the picnic is an A scene. It has to be superb. And so this would go to Russell, the cameraman, and he said, well, where you want to film, only 1 hour a day is good for light, filtering through the trees. The scene will take 6 hours to film, so we have to come back for 6 days just for 1 hour. And I said, well, we have to do it. And we did it that way.
And moving on to the last wave, which I find an incredibly timely contemporary film. I mean, it looks like it's a story that is talking about today, both because of its environmental subtext, but also because of the fact that it's a film about an encounter or a challenge between cultures. And I feel that this is also another theme that is quite recurring in your films, finding a character who, for one reason or another, is challenged in his own identity by the surroundings, by a new surrounding. In this case, the finding of an Aboriginal tribe living in Sydney, in the underworld of the city. And it kind of mirrors also what happens to Mel Gibson in The Year of Living Dangerously. He finds himself in an Asian country without really understanding what is going on with the political, but also the human landscape around him, or what happens to Harrison Ford in Witness. I mean, the fact that he enters this community of Amish people who seem to be so different, and then he kind of finds home there. So I was curious to know about this kind of thread that we can find in some of your films about characters who encounter something else, something different, but that relates to themselves, makes them understand something about themselves.
Well, you know, that lovely phrase, the gunpowder trail that leads back to childhood. I think even beyond childhood, that journey I took in 1965 at 25 weeks on the ocean gave me a sense of distance from Europe, my origins, Scotland, from my great-grandfather. So I think that kind of experience, whereas today, you know, here I am 24 hours away from home, not 5 weeks. It gave me a great gift, I think, that perhaps I was unconsciously working on in some of these films. The Stranger in a Strange Land. It was certainly how I encountered, you know, Europe in that time. Hitchhiking around Europe for weeks. You could still do that then. You were always studente, you know. Here in Italy, I had a wonderful ride from Rome up to the far north with a guy, no English, he was Italian driver. He said, inglese? I said, Australia. I said, you? And we got talking and he said, in the war, you were in the war? He said, yeah, partigiano. And I said, partisan, right? You're partisan? Yeah. Whoop. Then he said, sing the song. And then he sang, and I learned it in the car. Partigiano, van fotria, la ciao, 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 partigiano, over here, il batto, il vaso. Anyway, life is, I think I'm one of those directors more like those of the late 1920s and 30s in the United States, the immigrants. Fred Zinnemann once said to me here in Venice, he said, you were like a successor to us. And I think that's because no film school, not a film buff, but something of an adventurer, and in a way making films about life, not about other films. And there's no one way to go, but there are other filmmakers who his experience of life is in the cinema, and they can be very clever at doing
that. Talking about war and experience of life, the following film. In 1981, Gallipoli is your take on the experience of the Anzac, the Australians who enlisted in the 1915-18 war in the British Army and had a very important role in the win of the First World War I. What I always remember about that film, and I really, really cherish, because I think it's really a highlight in your career, and not only is the final scene of the film, the whole construction of the final run of the Mel Gibson character to get that message to save his best friend. I'm really moved by just by telling the ending of the film. It's an incredible construction of alternate editing, of the sound, of the music. I'm just very curious if you remember how you conceived that, because it's really structured so well, and it comes with an incredibly powerful flow. And the very ending, it's really quite an immortal image, an epitome of anti-war imagery. So I'm just curious, how it came to your mind.
Thank you. I went there in research to Gallipoli Peninsula in Turkey. I was on my way to London for the opening of Picnic at Hanging Rock, and I was in early stages of planning Last Wave, but I thought I'd like to do something on the First World War. So Australians had fought there at Gallipoli and lost the battle. And it's still a military zone, and there were a couple of soldiers in the distance. The trenches are still there. It's more settled now because it's become a pilgrimage site for Australians. Anyway, I went down and swam in Anzac Cove. No one there. Then I walked up Shrapnel Gully, where the soldiers I knew had been, and found bullet casings, bits of metal. It was a battlefield, all right. And then I had a strange experience. I thought I was being watched. And I thought maybe it's the Turkish soldiers I'd seen earlier. I looked up to the ridge. I said, "Anybody there? Hello?" Nothing. And then I knew it was the dead watching. So I said, thought the ridiculous, I thought, the dead? And then I found myself shouting out, ridiculous, even now to remember, "Show me your things." This was an odd sentence in English. "Show me your things." And I turned the bend, and there, laid out, was a boot shrunken down from the sun. There was some knife and fork and a bowl. There was some broken pottery. There's things of the soldiers. And that night, thinking about this experience, I was overcome with emotion and thought I must make a film for these men who are, in a sense, are still here. So in a way, the film was a sort of war memorial.
And moving on to the following film, sorry, I'm following the chronology basically, you understood that. The Year of
Lucky there's not so many.
Yeah, I forgot. The Year of Living Dangerously was yet another adaptation. It's a film that you set in a foreign country in the past. But what I find, again, really striking as the ending of the film, which really felt like a classic. Like it really felt as if it was a rereading or re-presentation. Do you want me to help you?
You could use this in a movie. I'm sorry, I lost your question. A little bit of the Last Wave.
No, sorry about that. I have the feeling that the ending of Year of Living Dangerously is playing out as really a classic. When I see it every time I'm thinking of Casablanca. It's kind of, but it feels like that. It feels like there is a moment when you leave the world behind and you just celebrate the intimacy between these two characters. Again, was it there from the start, from the script? How much of it was created on set in terms also of the way it is shot?
Well, we Australians live very close, of course, to Asia and the Pacific region, but Bali is a #1 tourist spot for Australians. So I've been there a number of times and loved Indonesia. I've been to Jakarta too, and loved his book. And I love the fact that it was so unknowable. There's a lovely line in the book from the author Chris Koch, and he says, when you first go to Asia, you become like a child again, full of wonder, not sure how anything works or why. And so I love to capture this atmosphere. Also very interested to do a love story for the first time. And it was the first time that Mel Gibson had done one, and the first time Sigourney had done a love story. And so we came to the scene where they had to kiss. And neither of them had ever kissed. They were like two virgins on screen. They had never kissed. And so we rehearsed the scene. And I have to say, it was a very bad kiss. And I took Mel aside and I said, "Mel, what's wrong? It's not working. You're just pressing too hard." He said, "No, it's not me. Sigourney's coming too hard at me." I went to Sigourney and she said, "Mel is..." So I got some film together of some of the best kisses in movies, maybe 3. Hitchcock, very clever with the way he photographed it. And I got some interesting notes from, I think it was George Stevens. Better to shoot over the shoulder for a kiss than profile. Because over the shoulder, you the voyeur, can't quite see exactly what's going on. So I showed the two of them the scene. It still wasn't quite working, and Mel, I think, was right. Sigourney was the one pressing too hard. So I went to Sigourney, "Forgive me, Sigourney, if you ever see this." And I said, "Sigourney, the only way that I can know what's wrong really would be for me to kiss you. But that DGA, the Directors Guild, would not permit that, nor the Actors Equity. But I wonder if you could kiss my hand so I could feel the pressure." Oh. Well, we just ended up laughing, and the laughing was the way that we got the scene done. We all relaxed.
It's really wonderful. And in regard to the year of living dangerously, but also in regard to the witness afterwards, I'm curious to know about casting, because Sigourney Weir was here doing a Masterclass a couple of days ago, and she was actually praising the role that role had in her career in defining the understanding of her bearings as an actress.
I'd love to know that she said that.
And I feel that in general, at many points in your career as a director, in choosing actors, you have showed the potential that certain actors had that they hadn't shown up till that moment. You know, Mel Gibson had made his name through Mad Max, but then it's thanks to Gallipoli and Year of Living Dangerously that he was also seen as a drama actor. Sigourney Weir also was coming from genre. She was famous mostly for her work with Ridley Scott in Alien. And then Harrison Ford was Indiana Jones and Star Wars. So was it also something conscious of you in choosing those actors to play something that was not exactly what we would expect of them at that moment in time?
Well, you know, it's a hard question to answer. because you don't know yourself, in a way, even you could analyse something. All I do know is that as I met these people, I met actors in Hollywood, for example, that I knew I couldn't work with. They were famous, but in chatting or having a drink or something, I couldn't sense a sort of rapport. And the best work is when you have someone in which you have a rapport. With a movie star like Harrison, when I met him, any sort of awe at his reputation was dissolved very quickly in our conversation. Because I would say, and he picked up from me, that we have to create something together that I used to always say to people is just outside our reach. We have to stretch to get this thing right. And it's not about your ego or my ego. Yes, I'm the leader. I have the final say, but I would never do something that you felt uncomfortable with. So they knew right off that it was not about me, the director, or anything. It was how to make this powerful. I remember, the great inspiration for me, Stanley Kubrick, whom I did finally meet. I had a wonderful afternoon with him, an evening at his home in England in 1982. But in an interview, one of his rare interviews, he was complimented on his imagery, his images, and he said, well, it's the power behind the image that matters. And this is what I was always looking for, this power. Power so strong it could shatter glass almost. And to go there into the depths of the mind and find that is something they knew I was asking them to come with me and to do. So maybe they dropped some ego.
Witness was your first Hollywood production, your first studio film, and after that you have made several ones that were very successful. Do you think you brought anything with you out of Australia or your experience as an Australian filmmaker into your Hollywood career?
Well, I had been offered films beforehand, but didn't feel it was the right time. Stanley Kubrick recommended me very early on for a script he passed on. He was doing Stephen King. He was going to do Salem's Lot, and he moved from that to The Shining. And he called up the executive at Warner Brothers and said, you should, I've just seen this people get hanging rock, and he liked Cars of that Paris very much. And he said, you should use Peter Weir, this Australian director, to do Salem's Lot. I went and met John Kelly, head of Warner, and said no, in the end said no, make some more films in Australia. So when I went to Hollywood, I was very experienced, but now came the most important moment that set me up for the rest of the time in Hollywood. In the office, after meeting Harrison has telephoned us, hugely powerful man, Harrison. And he says, great, let's do this. Let's do it. And I said, before I say yes, can I tell you the story? And they smiled, they laughed. They said, you want to pitch us a story that we're offering you? I said, yes. It'll take 10 minutes, but you will have a better understanding of what I'm going to do than the screenplay. If you've got 10 minutes. And he said, yes. So I stood up and began telling them the story. We opened with wheat fields billowing in the wind. Then we see some black shapes come up. Amish people heading down a road. We see buggies, horses. It's a period film. But then up comes a title that says it's 1984. It's modern. And so on, through to the end of the story, where Harrison leaves Calamigos. And Jeff said, well, yes, you're right. I have a better understanding of how you're going to make the movie than anything. And when we came to do Dead Poets together at Disney, he was Disney then, before shooting, he said, would you come to dinner tonight and tell me the story of Dead Poets Society at my house, which I did.
I'm being signaled that we need to rush through the rest of the films. I'll ask a question that goes back to the craft and that refers to the following films. Films like Witness, Mosquito Coast, Dead Poets Society. Because one of the other things that I really love about your films is the use of the music. You know, there are directors who overdo it, but it always feels like your work with music and with the composers you work with is very subtle, and the music starts exactly at the right moment, and it's there with the kind of tempo that really has something to say within that scene. And I think the work, for example, with Maurice Jarre is something that is especially meaningful in that sense. I always feel that the scores he composed when you work with him are really perfect in terms of the kind of emotional tone that they add or complement to the scene. So I just wanted to ask you, what is your relationship with scores, with film music, and how you work with the composers?
As I walked around the farm of Stanley Kubrick's, I said to him, Stanley, wouldn't you love to do the music yourself? He said, oh my God, yes. I said, I know you'd make the coffee if you could. You'd make very good coffee. He said, yes, I could do the coffee. And so for me, it's true. I think of all the arts, at the top of the mountain is music. I think before they drew on the cave walls, they were whistling and drumming. And for me, all my films are made with music. I have music when I'm working on a script, music when I'm shooting. On my way to work sometimes in the car, I put on my headsets and with the music of the moment I was playing to get myself into a kind of almost a trance of the music, beyond words, beyond intellect. Because it's the hardest thing is to free yourself from your intellect, making films. You have to have it for the rationality of the story, for its conceptions, and to talk to people. But most important of all is the unsayable, which is the unconscious that will deliver you inspiration like music. So Maurice understood this, how much I loved it, and he didn't care if I put in little guide tracks. He didn't phrase him, he'd say, I see what you're thinking. And he would then interpret it in his own way.
And going on with Dead Poets Society, again, it's a film that makes me think about casting choices. Once again, an actor who is kind of typecasted, like Robin Williams, that you once again discover as an actor that is also capable of playing very, very well in a different register. But at the same time, Dead Poets Society is a film with a lot of young faces, new actors that then, like Ethan Hawke, made a fantastic career. So what about the casting of new actors, of new faces? How is it for you to find the right young actors when it is a matter of discovering someone?
Well, first of all, a very good casting director, I have to say. For example, in Witness, who is to play the Irishman who would end up with the girl? Because if you have a film where they don't get together, she is going to end up with this Alexander Goodenough. And my casting director couldn't find the actor. She came in one day and said, last night I was at the ballet and I met this Russian, you know Alexander Goodenough? And I said, I know Barishnikov, but not Goodenough. She said, he has the most wonderful smile, but he's never acted. He could be interesting. And so then he came in, bang, that's it, he's right. So my compliments to Diane Crittenden, she chose it. But so you're like a detective looking for a missing person when you're casting. And many people know that there's a reward if you are the person. So they come in pretending to be the person. And you, as the director detective, has to decide who is the real one of this character. Critical period casting.
I'll move on to the latter films and kind of flash them all together in one question about craft again, which again I find extremely compelling throughout your career. Obviously, again, finding a kind of peak in films like Master and Commander or The Way Back. I think that editing is also one of the things that make your film so special. Your films never overstay, and it's quite a compliment these days. Your film seems to always know when a scene should end and when the film should end as well, because it feels like it's always the moment when you leave an emotion or a character when you still want of him or her or them. So I just wanted to ask you about your own way of dealing with editing and your editors, but in particular maybe on the two latter films, Master and Commander, which also was a different kind of genre for you. It's probably the closest to an action film that you have made, but also The Way Back, because it's a fantastic historical movie, which again has a terrific ending that collapses history and history with capital H and personal history in just a few minutes in a really terrific way.
Well, firstly, you need a good editor, naturally, and I say to the editor, I'm tired from the shooting, you cut it, cut anything out you want, cut it as if it was your film, and I will go away for 3 weeks and come and see it. And that way I get all the editor's ideas, things I haven't thought of. Then I begin my work. And part of that process is studying all the outtakes. I print out a lot of outtakes, looking for little moments in my room. I run them. And I also, importantly, watch the film at home. It was great when videotape came in. And watch it silent. Just the images. And see if the images are telling the story without sound. And that helped me look for one of the most unfortunate things that are cut. And it is, I used to put a big R up on the wall, repetition. Say it once and say it well. Don't say it twice. It's certainly not 3 times. And going back through the film, you say, my God, we've already done that, let's take it out. We've already said that out. Then in America, I learned to sit with an audience and watch it. That makes you sweat. Wow. Test screens. But you can feel the mood in the room. You're very hypersensitive. And if there was a slow spot, I would know that it wasn't occurring where it felt slow. It occurred earlier and pass the problem on. So I would get skilled at finding what caused the slow spot.
This is very interesting, because then it means you are very caring about the reactions of audiences.
Oh, yes. I made my films for audiences. I mean, it seemed to me only right. They pay good money to come and see a film, and you want to give them an experience. Hopefully an experience money can't buy, if it's good enough. So I came more from that, what I would call colonial tradition. In Australia, New Zealand, the United States, we didn't have your culture you have in Europe. We didn't have your church that commissioned the paintings and the frescoes. We didn't have culture. So when particularly in a working class country like Australia, when you put up your picture, it better be good, because you're taking their money.
Well, thank you so much. I think every single one of your film was worth our money. And with this remark, we have about 10 minutes for the questions from the audience. So yes, please, here in the first row, one moment, the mic is coming, is it? Do we have a mic?
For giving us such wonderful movies. In my opinion, you are one of the most gifted filmmakers in film history, and I think the audience will confirm it by a big applause. If there is something like, can you say what was your most important movie and what was your most difficult movie to shoot?
The first film, the most difficult. As for other scenes or moments, comes and goes. Only recently I thought my best moment was in Fearless, a film that not many people saw. When Jeff Bridges, the plane was going to crash, and was with a little boy, and he said to the little boy, just lie your head down, everything is wonderful.
This one in the first row, can we?
Your movies teach us that true conflict lies in the struggle between needs and desires. But today we get the feeling the stories have kind of shifted the focus a little. What's your idea of conflict in modern cinema, if you have one? Thank you.
I think that's too broad a question. Yeah, I can't say. Things always change. Yes, there is different rhythms, but I won't get it too deep water.
Ask you, considering that my society is my favorite movie of all time, and it has changed my way of looking at life in so many ways. So I wanted to ask. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. To change people's lives through your works and to help people understand how important it is to follow your dreams and passions.
Well, I would like to claim that, but I can't. It's just, if I was inspired, it's divine. Love you.
There are films that you regret not to have directed.
No, I think it's too hard. I'm always pleased when I see something I've said no to. Somebody has made it well. But if I said no, it's gone. No.
You said that you need to get rid of the conscious a little bit to get inspired. How do you get rid of the conscious just the right amount so that you get inspired, but at the same time you don't end up making the film that is only good for yourself?
It jams the radar. You can't think while you're loving some music. And mainly when I say music that I played while working on a film was instrumental music, whether, African tribal music or orchestral music or pop music, never vocal, and if it was vocal, not in English. So the intellect wouldn't latch on to the English words. And I would stop reading newspapers, stop watching television, switch everything off, and try to clear my mind in some way.
I'd like to know, as a director, when you meet strong personalities, the people you already know in some way, I think of Robin Williams or Jim Carrey, how do you work to take them in your world?
Well, with those two, for example, It goes back to the ship I mentioned at 20, doing entertainment, acting on board, comedy. Then later, I did a lot of kind of semi-amateur reviews, acting, comedy. So with those two, they knew that. I told them about it. And so together we would make jokes and invent things. When I first met Jim, first meeting, he was very nervous at his house. And we tested, I love the script, but yes, and I'm going to make some changes. And I said to him, I think probably there's a camera in the bathroom behind the mirror. And I think maybe he could do some little things in the mirror. And he said, yes, let's go to the bathroom. Come on. So we just did. We run down to his bathroom and he takes the soap and begins drawing on making funny little comedy in the mirror. And that was 10 minutes after we met. And sitting with Robin too, it was talking about, I said with him, let's see how low you can go. You're very full and big in your comedy. But I think you could maybe just raise one eyebrow and there'd be a little laughter in the room. Just a little small things. Let's see how small we can go, but not lose your charm. So there was trust.
This probably been asked to you lots over the years, but as an aspiring filmmaker, what is the thing you feel is the most important when beginning? What's the advice you would give to somebody who wants to do cinema as a profession? What's the most important thing while beginning to make movies? What's the advice you would give to somebody who wants to begin a career?
I think do some writing. Rather than pick up, we all have cameras. You can imagine when I was young it was expensive, to 16mm. A piece of paper is even now much better than a camera. Start writing ideas for it. I went to a film school once and they had all the cameras set up and they were practicing the students with acting, and I said, take it all away, all the camera, everything away. Let's just sit here and tell me something that you observed coming here this morning. Did you see, a strange dog? Or did you see a funny looking woman looking out the window? Did anything happen? Think. So it was getting them to like in a gymnasium to exercise the imagination, to be observant. These things are just equipment, they're just cameras to record it. First of all, you have to get your imagination working. And to do that, I think it's best not to watch too much. Here we go.
I'm planning on doing a movie because we miss you so much.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm retired. I handed in my badge and gun, and I'm retired. 5 years ago.
No new movie.
No, it took me 2 years to get off the kind of addiction. But I was ready. It's right. It's younger generation. It's your turn.
One last question.
Okay. Hi Peter, such an honor to be here. So I'm a teacher and I have been inspired with the Poet Society, and I try to inspire my students as well. So I just wanted to thank you first of all and ask you if you have any advice for young people, young generations. That's it.
Oh, to love. To enjoy the gift of youth. Number one, not to worry, no anxiety. Worry's okay. I think we have to worry about things, but anxiety is an enemy. I would just say really get into nature, really swimming is great. Get in the water. And don't be afraid, not to be afraid. There's too much information around now. And too much that makes the anxiety. But that's obvious, easy to say, I know.
They just need to live their life and fall in love and...
Oh yeah, it's great to be young, they have a gift, it's a gift in their hands.
Yes. We all have it. But even if we're not that
No,
anymore.
it's good.
we all have it. Thank you so much. Such an honor.
On this note, I guess I make a big thank you, Captain Weir, Captain Bartolin. Thank you so much.